back to Buses, Bikes, and Beers. I'm at Frank's place again today, continuing to work on the bikes. We've been talking about gearing for a while. The Apollo bikes are designed to be gravel bikes, so their stock gearing is really set up for gravel. For us, the gears were too low. We've talked about that before. We did change the rear sprocket last year to from a 24 to a 26 tooth. And that helped a lot. It made a noticeable difference in hill climbing ability in low gear. But we still felt like thinking about having these bikes fully loaded with panniers, getting over the Rocky Mountains, that lower gears would be necessary. So we ordered 46 tooth front cogs. The factory cog is a 50 tooth. And so we're gonna leave the 26 tooth in the back. We're gonna put the 46 tooth in the front, and that's gonna have a significant impact on the low gear. It'll have an impact on the high gear as well, but we would much rather have lower gears and sacrifice a little bit of the high end. We are not gonna be going super fast. We're not gonna be racing. So I've already changed out Mary Beth's, and today I'm gonna change out mine. This is the factory gear, 50 tooth. This is the 46 tooth, and you can see, I hope you can see, that there is a pretty big difference in their diameter. So it's that difference that lowers the gear ratio. Luckily, I can use the same belt, but I'm gonna be careful with this belt. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna loosen up. I'm gonna have to retension the belt anyway, so I'm gonna loosen up this back here and get some slack in the belt so that I don't stress the belt during this operation. So step one, loosen up this. Okay, so I've loosened these up, I've backed these off, and you can see the belt's super loose. There's a little dust cap thing here. It's actually threaded into this crank arm. Even though this crank arm is bolted here and squeezed onto the crankshaft, this thing threads into the crank shaft as well, and it does help prevent the crank arm from sliding off, and so it is necessary. I think it also keeps dust out of the bottom end, the bottom bracket, but you do have to take that off. There is a little special tool. I don't know if you can see, but there's some splines in there. This thing goes in the splines. Yep, set that aside. Next is I'm going to loosen up these screws that pinch the crank arm onto the crankshaft. When you get these two screws loosened up, and I've done that, there's a little plastic wedgie thing in there, and you got to pop that up because it actually is a part of the retaining mechanism, and it clips down into a little slot. So I take this little screwdriver and I flip it up. You just flip it up a little bit. I think you can see that. Really careful, but you just sort of help scoot this thing off. And so you maybe hit it down here with a rubber mallet. See, it's starting to come off. So then you just pull that off. That's one crank arm. Now, you just get a rubber mallet. You pound a little bit on this side. You can see that crank arm is coming out the other side. This is where you want to watch your belt tension. Make sure you're not stressing your belt out too much. Yeah, I'm going to loosen that up a little more. I didn't like how tight this belt was getting. I'm thinking to be safe, I'm going to take the rear wheel assembly off. Okay, I got the rear wheel assembly off, and now there's no tension on the belt, and so now I'm going to knock this back out. There. Okay. Now I have to take these bolts that you see, these 5 bolts that attach this sprocket to the crank assembly, noticing which way the sprocket is so I can get the new one back on. So I am going to disassemble this and put the new one on. Okay, now since this is the last one, I'm gonna be careful to examine how this assembly goes together. Okay, this flange is inset more, so the inset flange goes to the inside. Yeah. Goes back like this. Okay, I got them all snugged up. Now, before I tighten it all, I'm going to inspect it carefully to see if I notice anything not concentric or, noticeably bad. And everything looks pretty good. I'm going to do it similar to the way you tighten a wheel in a car. I'm going to get them all snugged up on opposite ends, like a star pattern. Okay, I got them all pretty snug, so now I'm going to tighten them. They should be pretty tight. Not kill yourself tight, but they need to be pretty tight. Okay, I'm gonna go around one more time. Make sure they're all pretty close to the same. Okay, now, all done. Now, before I put the crank assembly back in there, I'm going to clean this up. And I'm going to inspect the bearings, the bottom bracket. Everything looks really good. Okay, I'm going to put the crank assembly back on now. Time to put the crank assembly back on. I'm going to make sure that the belt is somewhat positioned. Okay, I can see that I've got it in there. It's freewheeling. Cog looks good. Doesn't seem to be warped. It's tracking straight. Okay. Now I'm going to put the crank arm back on the other side. Extra grease to the splines, just because it's nice to have the splines greased in case next time you have to take it apart, it won't be all stuck. So then this is actually keyed. It'll only go on one way, and that'll be 180 degrees off the crank on the other side. So we'll do that now. So I've got it on. You can see it's 180 degrees to the crank on the other side. I'm just going to give it a few little taps. Make sure it's seated. Then you can push this little, push that little thing back down. Now you tighten these up a little bit at a time on either side, and then you torque it to, it says right here, 12 to 14 Newton meters. My torque wrench set to 115 inch-pounds, which is about 13 Newton meters. And so I'm going to slowly tighten these a little bit at a time until I've got each side torqued to spec. Okay, that's tight. Okay, yeah, okay. Excellent. Okay, it's time to put the rear wheel assembly back on and begin the process of tightening the belt, tensioning the belt. But first, let's get the rear wheel assembly on. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the bike off, make sure the weight is on the wheel so we can make sure this thing gets fully seated into its carrier. So I can tighten up the axle. Shift cable's hooked back up. The belt's on. Axle's tight. So now it's a matter of getting this belt tensioned. And so, yeah, I think you just have to start moving it back until it gets seated. And then you tune it with the app. And I'll show you how to do that. But now you just move these screws back to move the wheel assembly back until it's close. I did my best. I noticed this phenomena where it looks like the belt isn't seating. And at first I thought, geez, see how it's climbing up? It's climbing up out of the sprocket. See that? And I thought, oh my gosh, you know, there's something wrong with the pitch of the belt or something like that. But it turns out it's just belt tension. The belt needs to be tensioned more in order for that not to happen. So that's one of the things I learned. So if you squeeze the belt, it sucks it down into the right place on the cog. It pulls the belt into the teeth on the cog. And then now the belt's loose. And so now you can move the rear wheel back and get it closer. But you can see where it was tightened before, where the paint is. So we expected to have to move it back a lot because we went to a much smaller front gear. So the axle distance, the distance between the crankshaft and the rear axle, is going to be almost at the extent of the frame. And so you can see we got a long way to go. So I'll keep adjusting. So I just kept turning these in, pushing the wheel assembly back. And you have to do it on both sides. And the key is to keep the wheel centered in the frame to the extent possible and sort of sight down the belt line to make sure it looks like it's tracking straight between the two cogs, just to make sure it's really seated in there. This belt is too tight. I'm sure it's too tight, but you know, we got it good and seated. So now I'm going to back it off. So I'm going to back it off because this is just too tight. I've messed around with these adjustments on either side, and I've got the wheel pretty centered in the frame. I'm happy with where the wheel is located. The belt seems to be tracking great. The brakes are rubbing, but that's another problem, different problem. So now it's time to adjust the belt tension. So the way you tension this belt is much the way you tune a guitar. If you've seen Ryan Van Duzer's channel, then you're going to know all about this. But Gates has an app for belt tensioning. So you say bicycle, then you look at tension recommendations. We have an internal hub. We should be between 35 and 50 hertz. So then what you do is you put your microphone in your phone and you flick this like a guitar string and you let the app listen. So that's at 43. Okay, so I flicked it a bunch of times and I got an average frequency of 42. So I got a 41, a 43, a 42. The average of that is 42 hertz. And again, the recommendation is 35 to 50. I'm right in the middle. I think the tension's good, and it actually feels good when you feel it. It doesn't feel too tight. It doesn't feel too loose. I'm gonna tighten up these and check it again. Yeah, hopefully all that checks out good. But after I got the rear wheel assembly all tightened up, I rechecked it and the average went down a little bit. It was 42, now it's 37, and the recommendation is 35 to 50, so we're at the low end of the tension. I think what I'm gonna do is I think I'm gonna ride it for a while. Before we head off on our big adventure, I will double check the tension again. Oh yeah, that's a low gear. That is going to be a hill climbing son of a gun. Well, that does it for changing the gears. We got the gearing done on my bike, the gearing done on MB's bike. I'm anxious to get up on the road to Bone and see what the difference is. A few more things we got to do to the bikes before they're all ready to go. But we're winding down all of the tasks on the bike. Yeah, so that's changing the gears. And for those of you who have an Apollo, if you are happy with the stock gears and aren't doing a lot of climbing and aren't planning on using your bike for touring, if you're just going to use it as a gravel bike, I'm guessing that the gears are fine. If you want a little bit more climbing, then you can get the you can change the rear cog from 24 to 26, and that will definitely lower the gears. But if you are looking for sort of the maximum gear climbing and you want to make your Apollo a tour bike, like we've made these, I recommend this 46-26 setup. 46 teeth in the back and the front, 26 in the back, and you can see you still. You have to move the rear wheel assembly pretty far back in the frame, probably about as far back as you probably want to go to use the stock belt. But yeah, we will stay tuned. We'll let you know how the climbing goes, how we feel about these loaded down with bags and panniers and all our stuff. It's been a few days since I changed the gears on my Apollo, waiting for the weather to get nice to go for a ride, test out the gears, maybe do some hill climbing. Today's the day. It's nice today. Mary Beth's not feeling 100%, so she's not going to be with me today, but I'm going to go out and see what I can learn about my new gears. But I don't have the bike loaded. I'm just going to take it as is and just see how it goes. Then maybe the next trip with Mary Beth, we'll load them up and see how they do. But today I'm going to try to get an apples to apples comparison to how the new gears do, because I've ridden the hill that I'm going to ride today with the bike, with the bare bike, no bags, so it'll be a good comparison point. So here we go. Okay, so I'm on a pretty flat section and going about 20 miles an hour, and I still got high gears beyond this, and I can't imagine using them very often except maybe going downhill. So I think the sacrifice on the high end of the gears for me is a good trade-off to get the lower climbing gears. Okay, so I started climbing, and if I remember right, this section, which is about 5%, when I first got the Apollo with its standard 50-24 gear set,
I'd have to be in first gear. And then I was sort of, you know, it was not super easy. Then I got the 26 tooth in the back, and I could do this in second gear. Now that I got this final setup, I'm in third, switching between third and fourth gear. So definitely proof that what you'd expect, it's better at climbing hills. Another long, not super steep, but goes between 5 and maybe 7% along in here. So, and it's a long pull up this hill. And I do think I'm at least 1 gear higher than I was with the other gears, with the other sprockets. So yeah, I'm quite pleased. Well, I'm gonna turn around here. I climbed 1,300 feet and I'm at 15 miles. So it'll be, I just head right back to Frank's place. It'll be 30 miles round trip. But the goal of this ride was to test these new gears, the 4626 setup. And I'm super happy with it. I think it's gonna allow me to climb some pretty good hills with the bike fully loaded. I'm not gonna set any speed records because it's gonna be slow, but you know, that's okay. We're not in a race to get across the United States, so we just want to get there. And I think these gears are really going to help us do that. You've probably noticed I wear knee braces when I ride, and it's because I got bad knees, and my left knee has been giving me some trouble lately. So I've been doing some strength training and some stretching and some yoga for cyclists, and I think it's helping. But certainly the lower gears, you know, with bad knees, you need to be a high cadence, low force rider, and these gears are going to help us do that.
Here comes Bentley. Do you think he'll see me? I'm not sure. It's not like I have my high-vis jacket on or anything. He's probably just going to fly right by. He probably is just going to fly right by. Oh, he did see me.
I know you.
He did see me.
I do know you.
He did see me.
I do know you. I do know you. I totally do know you.
Hi.
What are you doing?
I went for a bike ride. It's a beautiful day.
Yeah, I did too. You could have gone with me.
No, I couldn't go that far. This is as far as I could go.
Did you know I was coming?
Yeah, I've been watching you on the map.
I know you.
How is it?
It's really good.
Tell us all about it.
I went all the way up to the part where it's 9 and 10%. And I did have to go to first gear, but it felt good on my knee.
Oh, good.
But I think in this part, I was at least 1 gear higher than normal. So the lower gears are definitely, and I tried on the flat. I was going 21 miles an hour down here on Sunnyside. And I had gears, I still had gears
up the
higher
top.
on the
Yeah.
top.
Mm-hmm.
So
what about on the way down?
I just used gravity.
Yeah.
I just used the gravity. So anyway, I think that's going to be it for this episode of Buses, Bikes, and Beers. Thanks for watching. I know that the last couple of videos have been not our typical video. They're a little bit of how-to. Stay tuned for next week, where we're going to be starting to talk specifically about the ride and planning, and you're going to see some stuff leading up to that ride. That ride starts in early June, so it's a month or so away. So you can expect some episodes that are talking about how we're preparing in detail for that. And yeah, so look forward to that for next week. But for now, thanks for watching. Enjoy the ride. Oh, I got my helmet. My camera's on my helmet. But as soon as I'm done with this, that helmet's going back in my head. Wear a helmet. Okay, see you next time.